Just a quick introduction to the team. If you are joining us here for the first time, maybe you could put in the chat, let us know where you are coming from. We've had a few of us telling us where you are coming from. Sarah from Namibia, you are welcome. Daniel from Valley View Universities, you are welcome. I can see Professor Pai Obanya. Thank you so much every time for joining our programs. You're warmly welcome to today's program. It's interesting. We are discussing the theme, less than 100% qualified for a job, should I apply? And so we are here with a very great resource person who would lead the discussion for today's topic. And so we want to welcome you once again. We'll start shortly with a presentation by the lead of Jobs Board. But before that, we will take a quick advert from the Jobs Board team, and then we'll continue from there. Deborah Dairo from National Open University, you are welcome. Dabugat University of Jos, Nigeria, you are welcome. Foluke University of Ilorin, you are welcome to today's session. We know that it is going to be a great one, and you are all welcome to help. We are here to help ourselves. The Jobs Board is a platform where we encourage mobility for us as students and also as faculty, where we can place our jobs on there. We encourage everyone here to, if you have jobs from your universities, to send it to the Jobs Board team at AAU so that we can display your jobs for us. If you're also a job seeker, you can also go to our website. I'm sure the facilitator will give us more on how we go about that, but we want to warmly welcome you on behalf of the Secretary General of the AAU, Professor Olushola Oyewole, to today's meeting. Thank you so much for joining. Okay, so would like to introduce our manager for the Jobs Board project, in the person of Mr. Larry Salu. So Larry, if you can hear me, please, over to you. Thank you so much.
All right, so good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. I'm Salu Adams Larry, and I'm the Assistant Project Manager of the African Jobs Board. Allow me present to you the Jobs Board presentation. Let me share my screen with you. Can you see my screen? Can you please see my screen? All right. Okay. African Higher Education Jobs Board platform. The Jobs Board platform was launched the last quarter of 2020, November, and then and it has been the first website for the continent serving job vacancies, which includes academic and non-academic jobs at the universities and higher education institutions across Africa, PhDs opportunities, careers, advice, and then country profiles. The African Jobs Board aims to increase academic mobility by providing professional service roles within Africa and support the continental recruitment for African higher education institutions. The main four project objectives is to share employment opportunities in higher education institutions across Africa, to retain and cultivate excellent talent in Africa, to gain knowledge about the African academic jobs market using the data and statistics produced, to provide career guidance to help job seekers hone their talent. The platform or the project has three partners. Of course, the Association of African Universities, Warwick Employment Group, and then ESSA, Education Sub-Saharan Africa. The Association of African Universities is the long-standing leader in the space of African tertiary education. Its mission is to enhance quality and relevance of higher education in Africa and strengthen its contribution to African development. Warwick Employment Group provides worldwide employment opportunities for students, institutions, and their staff. Education Sub-Saharan Africa is an independent charity whose purpose is to join up, inform, inspire, and increase impact for everyone investing in education in Sub-Saharan Africa. And allow me share with you some statistics since launch. We have a number of jobs posted on the platform since it launched, over 4,000, and we have over 261 employers, which means institutions that have created platform, and they are currently using the platform to advertise their vacancies. And we have post on social media engagement rate. We have 96 tweet, 49.6 engagement rate. And then we have over 30,000 site users or visits by job seekers. And so far, we have 1,367 of job those who applied for jobs via emails, and then over 3,000 via URL. We have subscription, we have 564 profiles, and then 2,242 jobs alert. And currently, we have over 40,000 sessions. So this data is accurate as at today. But some benefit using the African Jobs Board. One, using the platform helps to improve your institution with exceptional African talent. The platform assists in educating tomorrow's or future leaders. The African Jobs Board was created to benefit the entire education system on the continent, which has always been the goal of the Association of African Universities. Thank you. This brings my presentation to an end. Over to you, our moderator.
All right, thank you very much, Larry, for this presentation. We know that the Jobs Board is here to serve the Africa continent, and we encourage that if this is the first time you're hearing from us, maybe you could join the platform. You can enter to the platform to see. So without wasting much time, we'll take a quick We will take a quick promo from the jobs board team. And so right after that, we'll introduce our facilitator for today's program, and then we'll continue from there. Thank you so much for joining. If you are now joining, it is the jobs board live webinar, enhancing human capacity, and our theme for today's discussion is that less than 100% qualify for a job. Should I apply?
No need to go looking. Looking for a job in higher education institution on the African continent? There is no need to go looking. The Africa Education Jobs Board will deliver available jobs to you via our platform. To start your search, visit our website. On our website, you will find variety of job postings classified by the sectors and professions they belong to. There are sections devoted to variety of career-related materials, as well as information on African countries. All information you require based on the job description and requirements are accessible on the site. If you are looking for a job in higher education on the continent, use our dedicated portal www.africa.edujobs.com. For job market updates, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at AF Jobs Board.
Yes, thank you so much. And so that is just a quick information on the Africa Jobs Board. And we want to once again welcome you for joining us. And so just a quick introduction of who our facilitator is. So our resource person for today is called David Ampofo Nkrumah. Is a talent acquisition expert and human resource practitioner with a career spanning some of the world's top firms, including Deloitte and Unilever. And we all know for us here in Ghana, he is a favorite among the HR practice and has earned a nickname as the recruiter's recruiter. In 2020, he launched his first published series, The Job Seekers Cheat Book, to help job seekers navigate the confusing words of job search. And so it is my singular pleasure to invite David Ampofo Nkrumah to today's program. So David, if you can hear me, it's your turn to educate us if we are sure that we can apply for a job. So David, welcome, and then over to you.
Hello, thank you, Irene, and a warm good morning to everyone. I believe you can all hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, and thank you so much for joining.
Okay, great. Okay, so Irene, how does this go? Do I launch right into my presentation, or there will be something else before?
I think that now the floor is yours, and so please do as you wish. We are here to learn, we are here to study, and so please go ahead. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you. And good morning once again. I really appreciate you considering me. I don't consider myself an expert in talent acquisition, though I've been working in it for more than a decade now, but I really appreciate you considering me to be able to share my knowledge with you, what I've gathered over the years. And I must say, when I got the topic from your team, I've been dealing with Comfort over this for the last few weeks. I just looked at it and I realized that this is a question that most applicants should be asking themselves, not only when they feel that they are 100% qualified, but even when they are maybe 110%, 120% qualified. They should still ask themselves, should I even go ahead and apply? But because this is looking at the person who is asking himself that, look, I don't see myself as 100% qualified, would I be in the right place to still go ahead and put in my application? And that is what we want to answer today. If you don't mind, I would want to share my screen. I did a little presentation to guide our conversation this morning. So just pardon me a few moments so that I can bring this up. Kindly let me know when you do see my screen. Please confirm.
No, we can't see screens.
Okay. My apologies. I don't know why this is acting up. Let me try one more time.
You can also send it through email. We would share on your behalf if you're having difficulties.
Okay, sure. Let me try that so that we don't waste much time. Okay, so I've shared it, I think, with Comfort.
Okay, so David, you can go ahead whilst we try to share the screen here.
Okay, sure. Okay, so I was saying that when I got the request from your team, I kept asking myself and telling myself that this is a question that almost every applicant should be saying to themselves anytime they see a job offer, because it would even help you to prepare your CV, which is more or less a marketing tool. I always tell people that your CV should be seen as your marketing brochure, because that is what recruiters would look at and decide within the first few seconds, amazingly within the first 30 seconds, that, well, this looks like a potential or like someone that we will be able to work with. So anytime you have the opportunity to apply for a job, the first question you want to do, or the first thing you want to say to yourself is, do I even qualify? Do I even meet the basic requirements that is needed to be able to apply for this job? And that is what I would want us to discuss this morning. I don't know, I just got an indication that my screen is sharing. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So in today's discussion, we would be looking at a few things. I try to break it down into very simple talking points so that we would have enough questions. As much as I would try to cover what I think is relevant, I know that it would also raise a lot of questions. So what will we be talking about today? First of all, I would want us to look at how a typical job announcement looks like. And I'm starting from the job announcement because that is the point at which we decide whether we want to apply or not. For most of us, understanding what makes up a typical vacancy announcement would be the make or break when we decide to apply for any role. And so I would want us to look at that. Then I would want us to go behind the scenes when recruiters are hunting for people, when they are looking for talent. What are they really looking for? The job announcement says one thing, but then the recruiter may be looking at something else. Now, this does not mean that they put false information out there. No, they put the right information out there. But out of all that information that is listed, most of the time they are looking for just a few things. And once you tick those boxes, you would be the ideal candidate to be called for an interview or to be shortlisted. We cannot say for a fact, or I cannot say on this call what exactly every recruiter will be saying, but then I'm sure with what I would share today, it would guide you for you to make certain safe assumptions, which would help you to decide on whether or not to move with an application. And even if you be a very great candidate for that role. Then finally, we'll go to the question on everybody's mind. When should I apply? Why should I apply? Should I even think of it? Should I move ahead? That is what we'll look at. And then we'll now touch on the non-negotiables. As much as this is supposed to help us to know when we need to apply for a role, we also want to know when it is not even ideal for us to move forward. And that is what we'll look at when we get to the non-negotiables. So, starting from the very beginning, we want to look at what a typical job announcement looks like. Now, when you go on LinkedIn, when you log on to any job board, you may find job announcements in different formats. But every typical job announcement will be made up of the things that we have listed here. First of all, you would find the job title or the name of the job, the name of the role, which tells you or gives you an idea of what the job entails. I must say here too that it is not every job title that corresponds to what happens to every organization. For example, you may see finance officer within firm A, which may be a very junior role, but then finance officer in firm B may actually be the most senior most role. And I say this with some experience because when I used to work sometime ago with Unilever, we had various finance levels. You know, we had finance officers, we had finance assistant managers and the like. Now, when you hear finance assistant manager, you would assume that, okay, so this is someone who has probably acquired a lot of experience, probably has maybe 5 to 7 years experience, is probably managing a whole team or managing 2 or 3 people. So that is why he is an assistant manager. And you may not be far from the truth, because this is what the typical finance assistant manager may look like. But then in my case, when you jump to Unilever, finance assistant manager is actually the first level role, the entry role. Anybody who has a degree and enters Unilever starts off as an assistant manager. And what is required is that you need about 2 years of working experience. We've had situations where people had just 1 year working experience. So then you notice that the title may not really correspond to what you are expecting of an assistant finance manager. But then you jump to a place like Deloitte and you see finance assistant manager or assistant manager in general terms, and you would be required to have no less than 7 years work experience. So I always tell people that when you look at a job title, do not get excited by what is written there. You really want to understand it in detail. So the first thing for any job will be the job title, but you always do not need to rest there. I've had people apply to roles only to realize that they were overly qualified for the role, or it was way below, it was way above them, because they just looked at the job title and concluded. That is why it's not always safe to just look at job titles, because they are not the same across industries and firms. Then, of course, we have the job level. In some job announcements, you may not see this. Job level basically refers to where that job sits within a firm. And if you were listening to me what I said earlier, typically in every firm, you can break the roles in terms of hierarchy into 3 grades. So we have entry, we have mid, and then we have senior. Now, of course, some scholars will break it even further where we have executive and a C-suite, and all that. But just for simplicity, just look at every job level being broken into 3 different grades. So the entry level, the mid level, where you gathered some experience, you are not really a junior person, neither really are you a senior person, but then you are just in there having enough skills, enough experience for you to be able to take on more additional. Then, of course, we have the topmost, which is the senior levels, where you normally have our managers or our executive directors and the like. So anytime you look at a job announcement, try and figure out which level this job sits, because that is what would even help you decide whether you want to go ahead and apply. So you are fresh from school, you see a job that says finance assistant manager, and you probably exclude yourself because, well, this is an assistant manager. Remember my example of Unilever, where the first rule for graduates, mind you, graduates is assistant manager. So you want to find out which level, where does it sit? If it says entry level, then of course you may have a chance. If it says executive or senior level, then of course you know that you need to gather enough experience. And I'm sure by this you are beginning to determine, okay, when should I even go in and apply or not? Then, of course, the next thing in any job announcement, if you are lucky, most of the times it's not put in there, but over time, more organizations are putting it in there, is the reporting line. As much as you may have a job title, you may even have an idea of the job level, you also want to know the reporting line, because some firms have very tall structures meaning that there are a lot of levels, even within levels. So you may be a senior level executive, but then it may happen that you may have a senior above you or 3 or more seniors. So let me explain this even further. When you take the entry level, which is very clear that, of course, there will be a lot of senior people above you, most of the times, jobs within the mid to the senior level is very difficult to tell if you are from the outside. If you are within, you already know how the structure is. But when you are from the outside, it's difficult to tell because you may not know immediately who reports to who. At best, most job announcements will just give you an indicator of the level of the hiring manager. So that lets you know that, okay, so there will be someone above you. But then if you are also lucky, sometimes the job will tell you that this role reports to this level, which is responsible to that level. Most of the time, they'll just limit it to the next 2 levels. In some organizations, it may end there, but in some firms, it may also mean that they may be higher levels. So always look at the reporting line, whether the role reports to someone above, which reports to another person above, or the role actually has reportees beneath it. So sometimes you may find in a job advert that says that this is a human resource manager role. The human resource manager would be supported by 2 human resource officers. So in this case, it lets you know that below that human resource manager, he will have some assistants beneath that would be reporting to it. And all of this is important even as you begin to make your decision on whether to apply or not. And we'll get to that, why it becomes important, because it would also inform you of whether it's a good career move or you are better off staying away. Then finally, well, not finally, the next thing is that in every job announcement, you also have the job description. And I must say, very few applicants actually take the time to really look at the job description. And I know this because when they come for interviews and you tell them, what do you perceive? And this is a typical interview question. What do you perceive as being some of the potential challenges of this role? Yes, you may not have worked in the role, but if you have read the job description, it can give you an idea of what to expect in that job and the challenges. So the job description is there for you to really understand the context of the job, what the job does, how it supports the firm, how it gets the firm closer to its objectives. And then, of course, most of the times you would have the organizational context, which tries to give you a picture of the organization as a whole. So a typical job description will tell you the details of the job, what needs to be done when you are in this job, and where this job sits. That is the organizational context, where this job sits in the grand scheme of things for the firm. So for example, let me use another department. Let's say if we have a job advert for a supply chain officer, the job description may talk about things like ensuring that we have weigh bills ready when we are sending out items, or we have we ensure that we have all our legal documents properly done if we have to cross borders with our goods or our services. But then the organizational context would be centered more on how the supply chain unit works with probably the finance team, or works probably with the legal team, and of course with other players within that same organization. And you really want to read this even as you begin to decide whether you need to apply to that job or not. Then finally, the next thing that you see would be the job requirements or the duties, which spells out what the typical job holder would be doing in such a role. Most of the times, you find candidates also not considering this. We tend to really focus on the job title because that is what appeals to us. But you also want to look at the job requirements. What will the job holder do? Will he be responsible for making sure that the team does its work? Will he be responsible for finance, making sure that responsible for managing a budget? Will he be responsible for a team and the like? All of these things are listed in the job requirements. Then once the job requirements come, the next thing you will often see is the skills, knowledge, and abilities required to do that job. Note, I want us to pay attention here. You will find the job requirements, which will tell you what needs to be done in the job. But in the skills, knowledge, and abilities section, you would find the skills that you as an applicant need to have in order to be able to do the job. So over here, you may talk about things like you should probably have skills in selling, you should have skills in preparing a report, you should have skills in managing a team, you should have skills in probably Excel, or for our computer science people, you should have skills in Python or R language or C++ and the like. You find all of this at the skills, knowledge, and abilities section. And you also want to pay attention here because it will also help you to make an informed decision if this is the job for you. Let me just jump a bit. We'll come to that, but I just want us to jump a bit. It is good to know the skills required here because it even helps you to decide if you have an alternate skill that may actually help you be a better candidate. And let me explain. Sometimes, let's say typically when we are looking for technology people within the computer science domain, we may list just a few of the skills required in terms of programming languages. The popular programming languages now are Python, C++, C#, and the like. And for if you are studying computer science, I'm sure you are familiar with this, but for those of you studying business, don't worry your head. Now, when we advertise for a software person, we may list a few of these programming languages. You may not have all of them because I know getting to the level of an expert in these languages can be very difficult. So most of the time you find computer science professionals specializing in just one or two. You may be the outlier if you have a unique skill set, which may still be transferable to the others. You always want to make sure that when you check for the skills and knowledge, you want to find out, do I have a transferable skill set? Or will I be able to quickly translate into those ones? If it's a yes, then you want to reconsider whether to apply or not to apply. Then finally, we have the submission dates. And I'm putting this here because you may tick all the boxes. In other words, you may be 100% qualified, but if you are not aware of the submission date, you will be 0% qualified. And this may sound funny, but why does that happen? People fail to take notes of deadlines when it comes to job applications. In all my career, throughout the years that I've been doing talent acquisition, I have always had candidates who would reach out to the front desk and for some funny means be able to even get the email address of probably the hiring manager or the recruiter, oftentimes being myself, and they will be asking to be pardoned because they are interested in the role, but they missed the deadline. When you see a job advert, if you miss anything, do not miss the deadline. Very few firms are merciful when a deadline is missed. And I'll tell you why. If a role brings in over 500 applicants, neither the recruiter nor the hiring manager has the time to entertain an additional one candidate, irrespective of how top-notch that candidate is, because 500 candidates is already a backbreaker. So you always want to ensure that you have your submission dates in mind when you are applying. And all of this should guide your next decision. So we've looked at the job announcement because it is the beginning of your decision points. You want to really assess the job announcement before you make the decision to apply or not to apply. And you want to look at all these 5 parameters before you go on. Okay. I understand there will be room for question and answers, so I'm just going to skip that so that we look at the next thing that we want to talk about. So with all of that listed, the job announcement, what really do recruiters look out for? If we have all these 5 sections that are all important in any job, what are recruiters really looking for when they put up an advert? The first thing I want to say is that there is no perfect candidate. I want you to scrap that from your mind. Sometimes you find applicants saying that I meet all the check marks for this role. I tick all the boxes, so I'm the perfect candidate. I can tell you 100 times over, you are not the perfect candidate, because the perfect candidate does not exist. He only exists or she only exists in the mind of the hiring manager. So there is no perfect candidate. And I know with that, you should start breathing a little, because when you see a job, anytime you see a job that looks just too much, or you feel is just above you, just tell yourself that there is no perfect candidate, and then begin to assess the job announcement. So the first thing that recruiters would look out for in any application, and I'm giving you this because I want you to arm yourself with it whenever you're applying, is they would look for reasonable experience that is either close to or more than what is required. Reasonable experience is experience that they can attest as being similar to what they are looking for or close to what they are looking for. A finance person in a manufacturing firm will have a totally different form of experience from a finance person within a professional services firm. Same as a finance person within the humanitarian setup. And of course, the finance person within the educational setup. But they are all finance people. They all study finance, probably studied accounting, they've all probably passed their ACC and their ICAGs. But then their experiences are different. Would you say that because of this, they will not be good for a particular job? The answer is no. Why? Because their experience is reasonable and is easily relatable. It's, in other words, you can put them in the different industries and they will just need to tweak their knowledge or tweak their skill set a bit and they are good to go. So when recruiters are hiring, they are always looking for reasonable experience. That is very close to what they are looking for. So probably they may list that we want someone with 7 years experience in financial management. Reasonable experience would be someone who has 5 or 6 years experience in finance. Shocking as it may sound, what this simply means is that if someone needs 7 years to be able to sit in that role, the person did not achieve that feat in his 7th year of doing finance. He gathered that experience over time. So if you have done finance for about 5 years, you would easily pass into a role that requires 7 years. And sometimes even a role that requires maybe 10 years, not in every case, but sometimes, not in every case. Let me put that caveat there. So whenever you look at a job application and it puts a range, now most jobs will put a range 5 to 7 years, and let's say you have about 4 years, do not disqualify yourself. You would want to put in that application. What you need to do is to be mindful of the fact that you may be short of what is being requested for, so you may need to make up for it in another way, and we'll come to that. So the first one is reasonable experience, either close to or more than. When it's more than, it's good, but in certain instances, it may also not be the best. Sometimes roles may tell you specifically that you need no more than 2 years to sit in this role. And if you are clocking 5, 6, 7 years, the reason why it may not be ideal for you to apply may be because that role is junior. So recruiters will reject you not because you do not qualify, but because you are overly qualified. And in HR, we are always looking at the chemistry or the hierarchy within teams. So sometimes when you have an overqualified person coming in, probably coming below someone who is less qualified than him in terms of experience, it will cause some imbalance. And of course, because of that, they would put you aside or not recommend. So you right here, you notice that even sometimes when you exceed what is expected, it may not work well for you. Okay, so you always want to find that sweet balance in there. The next thing that recruiters will look out for is a significant match in the essential qualities. Now, for most jobs, some recruiters will list the essential qualities and the desirable qualities. It's not in every job announcement that you see, but especially in jobs that may be common. In other words, there are roles that may have skill set that are common to a lot of people. They may have essential qualities listed there because they understand that these skills may be common within the market, but then we are looking for certain uniqueness, and that would often be placed in the essential qualities. Essential qualities generally mean that these ones are non-negotiable. In other words, any candidate that does not have these essential qualities will not be ideal for the role. The question you would ask yourself probably is, so if there are 5 listed essential qualities and I have none of them, should I apply? We'll get to that, but my short answer for you would be no, do not apply, because they are essential. If you don't have it, your CV may not even be considered for a second look. You would be tossed aside. What if there are 5 essential qualities and I have 3 of them? You may have a chance, and I'm using may here because if you have more candidates having all 5, then yours will be put aside for further review. But if you have less candidates who bring in the applications and they all don't have all the 5, then you are in a better position. So I always say that if you have about 60% of essential qualities, put in your application. So recruiters will always look for that significant match, whether your profile meets the essential qualities. If it does, then yes, they would push through. Then the next thing that recruiters will also look for are relatable candidates. And this is a tricky one. Relatable candidates are candidates that recruiters can easily see from their profiles. So recruiters may not know you personally, but by looking at your profile, they have an impression of the kind of person or the kind of individual that you are. And this is where sometimes it is very important how you craft your CV. It tells a lot. It tells a lot. From your CV, we are able to tell if you are diligent. And this that has nothing to do with us reading your experience. but it just has to do with the way you've organized your document. It tells us if you pay attention to detail. It tells us if you will be the friendly type. It tells us if you will be the focus type, or the type that would be interested in seeing things to the end and not leave things halfway. We see all of this from your profile, okay? And I wish I could share the secret to this, but then that would be betraying my fellow recruiters. The next thing that recruiters would also look for would be cultural fit, whether you will be a fit for the organization. Every organization has a culture, and culture differs from organization. No two organizations are the same. In fact, they may be within the same industry, pursuing the same customers. They may be even very close competitors, but then the culture is different. There may be similarities in culture, but then there will always be a uniqueness between these two firms. So for example, someone who works in MTN and moves to Vodafone would see a markedly different type of a telco firm. They may have similarities. They may be tech advanced. They may be inclined towards using digital means to execute their processes. But the culture will still be so different that you know immediately that this is not Vodafone and this is not MTN. It's the same even within the professional services. I have worked in Deloitte, and I have colleagues in the other big four. When we have our conversations, we recognize the similarities, but we also recognize the vast differences. So I'm sure if I were to walk into PwC or KPMG or EY in a few days, I would be able to tell that, well, they have the semblance of a professional services firm, but then they are so different in terms of what? Their culture. And so when recruiters are looking at profiles, they try to determine the cultural fit. Now, this is not easy to do with just a CV, and so they may have to do it a second time when you come for the interview. But here is the thing. The first decision to even get you into the interview will be made with just your CV. So you also want to bring out your ability to fit into the culture. And for applicants, it may be extremely difficult because if you have not worked in that firm, you may not even know what the culture is, but there is a way to find out the culture of the firm. Thanks to social media, you get a sense of how these firms behave. If you are close to someone who works in these firms, you will get a sense of how their culture is. And you want to leverage on such knowledge and experience in writing your profile, only if it is a culture that is appealing to you. Then the next thing recruiters look out for would be the probable growth in your career. When we look at CVs, we want to see whether you are growing. For example, if I take Ahmed's CV and all I see is assistant manager, finance, and I see another one, assistant manager, finance. 10 years down the line, I'm still seeing assistant manager, finance. On the surface of it, I'll ask myself, is Amma growing or he's staying within the same role? So I may do a second check and try to understand what Amma did as different assistant manager in these 3 different roles. If I notice that they are the same duties, the same responsibilities, the conclusion I come to is Amma is not a growing candidate. She does not seem to grow, she only seems to move into different roles. But if I look at it and I see, yes, they are all assistant manager, but in each of them, there is an increase in responsibility. Remember our first conversation that job titles are just names? If I do look at the responsibilities and I see that there is an increase in responsibility, for me as a recruiter, then I can determine that there is some growth in her career. And if it is for a senior role that I'm recruiting for, then I know that, okay, then this would be the ideal opportunity for Amma because I see her growing. This can also work in another way. Sometimes recruiters may come across profiles where we notice that the person has stayed at a particular level for a long time. Where long, maybe for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, the person has been at the same level. It gives us the impression that, okay, the person may be ready for a change. But then we always take this with a pinch of salt, because it could be that the person is not really a good performer. That is why he or she has remained at the same place for a long time. Or the person is not getting opportunity to grow. So we want to offer that person the opportunity if and only if the person meets some of the key requirements for the role that you are recruiting for. And then finally, recruiters would always look at the relevant training, education, and professional qualification. Training is first here because it surpasses education in some respects. Now, for most white-collar jobs, you may need education. So a degree, a master's degree, or a PhD in some instances. But most of the times, we also want to find out if your education can actually be confirmed in terms of what you are able to do. In other words, just because you have a first-class degree doesn't let us know or doesn't tell us that you are the best candidate for a job. In fact, we have seen over time that most people, second-class upper, sometimes even second-class lower, may be much more better executors of work than first class. This is not to say that having a first class is bad. It is ideal to have a first class, because in some firms, you won't even get in if you don't have that first class. An example would be Deloitte. And then KPMG. These are very keen that candidates, especially entry-level hires, do have first class. What I'm trying to say here is that beyond that, and that is because you need it to enter into the role. Beyond that, what training do you have? HR practitioners will tell you that training can be on the job or off the job. So typically, when we say what training do you have, we want to find out, have you acquired skills that make you execute the work? Because what you learned in school would prepare you to enter into the field, but training would give you specialized skill set, which may be good for a particular role. So when recruiters are looking at your profile, we look at your education, first of all, depending on the role. Do you have the education? That is good. You've crossed the first check mark. The next thing is, do you have the training? Have you been trained to execute that kind of work? If you have it, that is good. Then the third one would be, do you have a professional qualification? Now that gives us that comfort that you are committed to a certain standard. That is why firms like PwC, Deloitte would always want people who have their professional qualification, because it lets them know that this individual is committed to a standard, and it applies in certain roles, not in all roles. I would always advocate that always get your education, but make sure that you get some training that tells us that you have specialized skill sets in this field or not. So I just want to share this with you, that less than 70% of candidates whose profile, sorry, let me say, so when we take a candidate's profile and we look at the JD or the job advert against their CV, less than 70% of that match goes on to being shortlisted. And let me explain. So when we look at the job description and we look at your CV, once you meet 70% of it, you are most likely to be shortlisted. If you meet 60%, you are most likely to be shortlisted. If you meet 50%, you are most likely to be shortlisted. Anything lower than this decreases your chances. So what I always tell people is that make sure that what you are putting in can easily be matched to 70% of what is being required. It would increase your chances. I'm not saying it will make you the best candidate, but it would increase your chances of being considered. Okay, I think I've talked a lot. Maybe let me just pause and allow for some few questions before we go on, because we are moving to another part. Any question? I see something in the chat here. Okay, it's just, okay.
No, I think that we can continue when we are done. Everyone is muted.
Okay.
So when we are done, we can ask them to ask their questions.
Okay, sure, Irene. Okay, then let me go on. So with all of this, we've talked about the job announcement. We've talked about what recruiters look at behind the scenes. When do I even need to apply? When do I need to say that I'm going to put in my application? How do I know I'll get into an interview? The very first thing that I want you to keep into your mind is that when you meet more than 60% of the essential qualities, let me just rephrase that again and say that when you meet 60% or more of the essential qualities, so in the entire job advert that you see, okay, let's assume you've read everything and you zoom into just the essential qualities. If there's 5 of them and you meet probably 3, or if there's 10 of them and you meet probably 6, I would say go ahead and apply. If you meet less than this, it reduces your chances. So let's say if you meet 50%, I would say probably take the gamble, put in the application. But once it begins to drop 40%, 30%, you may not get an opportunity to be spoken to. Okay, because when you look at essential qualities, though some may look like they weigh more than the others, they do not act alone. They already depend on the other quality. So you cannot just bank on just one essential quality and think you may be an ideal candidate. So always find out for yourself, do I meet 60% or more? If you do, put it in. The next thing will be desirable qualities, and I'm going to talk about what that is. When I was talking about essential qualities, I mentioned that in some jobs, recruiters or hiring managers will list the essential qualities, which are the non-negotiable. In other words, if you don't have it, they won't even look at you. They would also list desirable qualities. Desirable qualities are what we call nice to have. It means it is not so important if you have these, but if you have them, it would boost your chances at being successful at a job. And to wait, boost your chances of even being called for an interview. So each job would have a time when a desirable quality may be an essential quality and vice versa. So I cannot say on this call that this is always an essential quality. It varies per job. So in one job, something that was an essential quality may become a desirable quality. And in another job, something that was a desirable quality will become an essential quality. Your job as an applicant is to find out, either through the job announcement or through engaging with other workers, if you have the opportunity, what are some of the key things that this role requires, and determine what these essential and desirable qualities are. So if you meet 30% of desirable qualities, I would always say put it in. If you meet 100% of desirable qualities, you're even in a better position, put it in. What I want you to keep in mind is desirable qualities are always expendable. The hiring manager, the recruiter can decide not to use it as a shortlisting mechanism. In some cases, it may give you an advantage, and that is why I say put it in if you meet at least 30%. When should you apply again? When you have worked in a related role or field, or you have exposure to this role that you want to apply to through another job. So, for example, you may be more of a procurement person, and I always tell people this. There is a difference between supply chain management and procurement. Okay, for those of you in that field, you already know that difference. With supply chain, you are looking at distribution, how you move your goods through the system so that it gets to consumers. With procurement, you are looking at bringing things in, and I'm using this as an example. Now, for you to be able to thrive in this field, you may end up working across in supply chain and procurement, in some cases, not in all cases. Even in your studies, if you look at the educational, the curriculum for supply chain management, sometimes you may find it being bundled together with procurement. So you have supply chain management and procurement. It's because they are so intertwined. They are so interconnected, you know. And so this is what we call related roles. They may not be entirely the same, but they are so intertwined. Now, let's say you see an opening for supply chain, but all your years of experience has probably been in procurement. You still have a chance because you may use the same terminologies, you may understand the same systems, probably even use the same technology. So when you are in such a position, I would always say, put in your application. In some instances, it may not be a related role, but it may be a role that works closely to that role. And this is where we talk about exposure. For example, finance is one role that works with almost every other unit in a firm. Finance works with HR, works with supply chain, works with procurement, works with IT. Finance works with almost everybody. And most of the times when you are developing technology for any firm, you even start developing for the finance team, because in essence, they would be responsible for every other firm in some way or the other in terms of making sure that they have funding to do whatever they need to do. So if you're in such a position, not only in finance, but if you're in any role where you have been exposed to how that role works, you may be in a better position to apply. Only if you are the type who is cognizant or you take notice of things, you have opened yourself to learn about that role, though you may not be practicing, but you may have learned about it, you've done some work or collaborated closely with them, and you are knowledgeable about how things work in there, you may stand a chance. So I always say that if you are in such a position you may put in an application. Then the next one, which is probably going to be your strongest bet when you are less than 100% qualified, is when you have transferable skills. Skills such as communication is needed in almost every field. So for someone who is in marketing, has done marketing and wants to transition into human resource management, communication would probably be your first transferable skill, because HR has to do with communicating right. When you have to communicate policy to people, when you have to let people understand that things are changing, new rules are coming in where there will be some agitation, you want to look at how you communicate. And you can get this skill very well if you've been in marketing before. So you've been in marketing for maybe 10 years. You are now interested in moving into HR practice. You may not have HR practice, but you have that transferable skill of communication. You have that transferable skill of building relationship, building partnership. You may be in a better chance. All you need to do is to find ways and means to express how you may fit in as an HR practitioner. Then the next one you want to also look at is when you have the education. You see this repeating itself right again. The education, the training, the professional qualification, but watch the caveat, with additional work experience. So I've often had candidates who come to me and say, well, I did accounting in school, practiced accounting for 10 years. Now I want to do procurement. So I've studied procurement, did probably a master's in procurement. I want a procurement role. The first question you would ask is, good, you have accounting experience, which may be very good in procurement because now you can check for discrepancies, you know, when you have to make sure that people are not cheating you in terms of how much needs to be paid and all that. But what additional experience do you have in procurement? If you have zero experience, you may not have a chance. So I always say that make sure that you get some form of experience. And experience that doesn't necessarily mean getting formal experience doing the job. For those of us who may probably be fresh from undergrad, an internship would be your best bet. Volunteering would be your best bet. Working on a project in the field that you are interested in would be your best bet, and would be the one thing that you can use to sell yourself as being ready to take up this role. And then finally, you are willing to take an entry role. And this is a hard one, especially if you've gathered 15 years, 20 years, and you are now trying to apply into a new role, you know, a role that you are less than 100% qualified for. You must be willing to take an entry role at the least in order to be able to enter. If you are fresh from school, then you don't even have an option here. You have to take that entry role if you are less qualified. So I've had situations where people have graduated 3 years out of school, probably done something else. They've seen a job or they've seen a role that appeals to them, probably what they wanted to do right from school. And is saying that for you to be in this role, you probably need 2 years, but their last 2 years was spent doing something else. You should not be afraid, especially if you're at that level, to start again. I've had candidates who took that risk, and this is not for everyone. I must say, it is not for everyone. It is for those who are willing to go that mile. I've had candidates who were willing to go to entry-level roles, and because of their dedication and their previous experience in another role, they were always jumped. So instead of probably moving to the next level in the next year, their managers looked at their work ethic, looked at their commitment, and jumped them maybe 2 levels up because they were what? Open to learn and take that role. So that's one thing that I always want us to keep in mind. So with all that out of the way, and I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to speed up a bit. With all of that out of the way, when should you apply? We've talked about some of the things to first of all check yourself against. When should you apply? How do you handicap your odds? Because you are the disadvantage here. You are less than 100% qualified. How do you handicap your odds of getting an interview? You always want to start with getting knowledge. Having a fantasy, for lack of a better word, about a particular role is not enough. And as recruiters, we come across a lot of people with fantasies about a role. I wish to be a consultant. I wish to be in marketing. I wish to be the learning and development manager. Most of the times when you ask them, what is it about this role that you know? You find out that they just know the job title and a few things about what the role does. They've not done the deep dive. They've not gone deep to really understand the role and even gone deeper to understand how it even impacts the operations of the business. You really want to research the role that you are less than 100% qualified, especially because you are less qualified for it. You really want to take that time to understand that role in detail. You may not get all the facts, but for me, I always say that make sure you know the role per what has been given in the job announcement. You know it in and out. And how do you do this? When you look at that job announcement, you want to, maybe now we have Google, just Google it. What happens when you are the finance manager? How does the HR manager do this? Just take your time to research the role. Researching the role is one of the greatest arms you can walk into an interview with. And it's one of the greatest weapons you can arm yourself with when you're writing your CV and even your cover letter, because the recruiter sees it and is blown away that this person knows what needs to be done. The next thing is to research the firm. Now, this may be even more difficult because you may need some inside info beyond what is provided on their websites or even on the tabloids. But you need to take that time to understand. The basic thing you can know about a firm is their operations, who their customers are, who their competitors are, and who the leader of the firm is. I remember my days with Unilever when we asked people, and this is the pre-interview stage when we are still screening because we get thousands of applications. We asked them to just write a short summary of Unilever, and very few people knows who the MD of Unilever is. Something that a simple Google search would reveal. So knowing who the leader of the firm is, as insignificant as that information is, it tells us that you've done your work. You know, knowing where we operate. I remember just not so long ago when I was with Deloitte, and this may sound funny, you ask people, what does Deloitte do? And these are people who want to work with Deloitte, not the audit and consulting side, but probably with the internal services side, so HR, finance. And the first thing they tell you is, oh, Deloitte produces Dettol. I had 2 candidates on 2 different locations, and I was amazed. Is it because Deloitte and Dettol sound so similar? So you jump to, this is someone who has not done the research. I even had one candidate who said, we produce ice cream. Funny as it may sound, it shows you that sometimes we don't take the time to really find out about the firms that we supposedly want to work with. So you want to take that extra time. Then the next thing is even more difficult is to know who the hiring manager is. And over here, we fall to no one because hiring managers actually want their piece, so they always hide. Now recruiters even hide. Sometimes I put up jobs and I hide because I know once this job is out there, the number of messages on LinkedIn I cannot respond to, But if you are able to find out who the hiring manager is, you are a step ahead of even the most qualified candidate. So if it means putting in that extra effort of being nice, and I want to sound a bit funny here, of being patronizing, and I'm putting this in quotes, just to find out who the hiring manager is, put in that effort. What you don't want to do is to become so pushy to the extent that you are now even blocked from accessing the firm. But let's say you see someone who has a connection to the firm, you can tell the person, I've seen this job, I'm interested in it. Do you know who the hiring manager is? Do you think the hiring manager will be open for a conversation? If the answer is a no, you have done your part. By then, it has shown what? Your commitment. And that is a very good sign. So this is the first thing. I can actually stop here and say that once you do this, you've increased your chances. But then, of course, there are other things that you may need to do. The second thing is to tailor your CV to the role. Do not send the same CV to every job. And this is even when you are 100% qualified. Always tweak your CVs to the job. Especially if you are less than 100% qualified, always tweak it. Take out the things that do not matter and put in the things that matter that are found on the job announcement, because that is what your CV will be measured against, whether by a human being or by a computer. You always want to tailor your CV to their job. The next thing you want to do is try and arrange to have a meeting, whether virtual, thanks to technology, or in person, with either the recruiter or a member of the firm. Social media has made it so possible now to talk to anybody. Years ago, if I wanted to talk to Comfort, who I have been in touch with over the last week, I would not even know she exists. But thanks to social media, Comfort, I think it's even close to this interview that we started having physical, actual phone call. We've been chatting, our conversations have been on WhatsApp. I've not seen her, but then it shows you that now we do not have an excuse when we have to connect with someone. It's very simple to connect with people now. So put in the effort, try and engage with the recruiter. Some recruiters are snobbish, I'll not hide that fact. And I don't blame them because they are overwhelmed with the kind of messages. But try. You never know when a recruiter will say, okay, let's talk. If it's not the recruiter, it's a member of the firm. LinkedIn, everybody's organization is there. You are interested in Deloitte. You see that this person works with Deloitte. You reach out. Mamiama, I see you work with Deloitte. I've seen this role here. I'm interested. Can you tell me more? Can you talk to your HR? Is your HR willing to talk to me? You never know how that conversation would go. So put in that effort. And then when you have that chance, try and emphasize on the elements of the job that you have. And let me say this with a pinch of salt. When you meet a recruiter, your first words should not be, please, can you help me get a job? It's a failure. That recruiter needs a reason to give you the job. And you want to give that reason. You don't want to beg for it. I've had people reach out to me on LinkedIn, and the first thing is, David, I've seen this job. please, can you put in a recommendation? I've had thousands of people saying, can you put in a recommendation for me on this job? I want it. And in my head, I say, I've not even seen your CV. How do I say you are the candidate for this job? So that one is a big failure. What you want to do is tell the recruiter you are thankful for this opportunity, you are interested in the job, and these are the things that you have. This is where you work. Do you think I have a chance? You are asking the recruiter for his or her honest feedback. Now, a good recruiter will tell you straight away that, well, you don't have all of it, but you may have a chance. So apply. Or, I'm sorry, Quincy, but this is what we are looking for. You don't have it, but I'll suggest you do this instead. They may even redirect you to another job. And that is what you want to hear. So when you meet a recruiter or you meet even a member of the firm who can give you inside info, you want to emphasize on the elements of the job that you have and ask them for their opinion. Still connected to that, you also want to talk about what makes you unique. Sometimes recruiters may be so overwhelmed with the candidates that they are seeing, but you may want to tell them something unique. So for example, you are interested in an HR role, you've done all the qualifications, but you are just not there. You can let the recruiter, let's say, for example, you've probably worked in events before. You can say, well, outside HR, I'm also into events. Now, why am I bringing this? I'm being biased there. HR in every firm, most of the times, is also involved with organizing events. Now, that may peg the attention of that recruiter because he says, okay, I am looking for an HR person, but I also need someone with that skill set in what? Organizing and running a smooth event. You are my pick. For you know, to it may be someone who may not have everything might be in there, but then they have that one thing that is still missing in the team. I've had situations where I've picked people for a job, not because of their skill set, but because of their personality. And why is that so? Sometimes in a team, you may find people that are all introverted. You need an extroverted person in there who would be the voice of the team. And that alone may be a qualifying factor. So you always want to bring that unique aspect of you. Let me share this example. In my early roles, when I started in consulting, it was a very small Ghanaian firm, but then they were bringing in a lot of revenue. I have an arts background. So growing up, I studied art, did a bit of art before I transitioned into business. So I still do arts sometimes, a bit of graphic design, a bit of fine art. In my interview, my recruiter asked me, what do I do for fun? And the only thing I could talk about was, well, I like to paint, I like to draw, I like to do graphic design. And when I got the job, they told me, well, we had to choose between two candidates. But for the fact that you have interest in art, we chose you because we need someone to always design our advertisements for our training programs. And we find it being too expensive. Sometimes it delays. Sometimes we do not agree with the graphic designer. So in there, I was HR, but I was also their in-house graphic designer. It may not work for everyone, but that was my unique thing. So you always want to have that unique thing too about you. It may sell in some cases, in other cases, it may backfire, okay? And then finally, you always want to get a recommendation. A recommendation may not always come from someone in the firm, but it can come from places where you've worked. So when you create a chance to meet the recruiter has spoken to you, you've expressed yourself, you may want to ask the recruiter, do you think you can probably let the hiring manager know of my... Now notice that this is coming after you have really shown what you can do, and the recruiter is impressed with what you have, though you may not meet it. Asking if he can recommend you is not a bad sign. What you don't want to do is to put this up the first time you meet. That's the no-no. If you are even lucky to meet the hiring manager, most hiring managers are in fact, all hiring managers are the decision makers. So if it's the hiring manager, it's even better because right there and then, even before the interview, he has hired you. He just needs to make the interview happen. So it's not wrong to ask when you have projected yourself and you have proven that you are a good fit. Then the other way to get a recommendation, and this is also a very tricky one in the sense that it may not always work because some people would not want to give you that chance, is to offer to do a project. I remember in my days at Unilever, we were recruiting for one of the teams. One of the candidates didn't make it to, he did not even get to shortlist. But he spoke to me. I realized he had potential. And this is a typical person of someone who had worked in another field. I think he had done finance, yes, and now wanted to transition into procurement. I told him it wasn't going to work because he has no work experience, but then I liked his zeal. So I showed him his profile to our supply chain team, and they said, well, we don't want his background, but for the fact that he has finance, let's just see what he can do because we have some struggles when it comes to our financial management in supply chain. And so we offered him a project. As I speak to you now, he's already with Unilever. And though he is not topmost, he is happy because it was his dream place. And it's happening because he was willing to take the chance of what? Doing this project and being recommended for the role. So these are the scenarios and the ways in which you can get yourself into the job. The last thing I want to talk on is when should you not apply? Because even with all of this, there's always that chance or that situation where it wouldn't be the best for you to put in application. It would be a total waste of your time and then the time of the recruiter. The first one is like the first one I talked of in the last slide. If you are not knowledgeable about the role or the firm and you are unwilling to put in the work to know, don't put in the application. If you do not know anything about the firm, do not go and say Deloitte makes Dettol or ice cream, or that the WFP gives food coupons. If you don't know anything about the firm and you are also not ready to learn what the firm does, you are not the candidate. Do not even put in the application. I know of candidates that have been blacklisted, and I'll not mention the firm, because they are repetitive scam harassers in application. Let me explain what a repetitive harasser is. Every job application, you will find their profile. Every job application. You are recruiting for a security man, their profile will come. You are recruiting for a doorman, their profile. You are recruiting for hiring manager, MD, finance officer, you see their profile. When we see this, we see that you are just spamming our system. You are just adding to the volume. And we need to assess. Every good recruiter would always have studied the analytics to see how many people are applying, the quality of applications and all. Sorry. So if we have you doing this, you will be blacklisted. I know some firms that do that. There's one firm that I work with, and the system, in fact, the system even recommends whether you should be blacklisted. And we decide whether to or not to. You don't want to be that. What that means is you block your chance. The only way you can get around it, I will not share with you because some of you will do it, so I won't share that. The second thing is when there is a significant gap in terms of the experience required and the experience you have. You remember I talked about the fact that sometimes the job will ask for 7 years, you may have 5 years, you can put it in. If the job is asking for 7 years, you have 2 years. I beg you, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time, don't waste your energy, it will not go through. If you have, the job is asking for 15 years, you have 5 years, do not waste your time. And let me even make it much more clear. Probably you are the finance manager of a small firm, so you are probably the senior most manager in that small firm, okay? And this other big firm is asking for a finance manager and it's asking for 10 years. Do not assume that because you've been a finance manager in a small firm, you would automatically qualify for that firm. It is very rare. the sizes of the firm alone may put you at a disadvantage, because the quantum of work done in the big firm compared to the quantum of work done in your small firm may not tally. And so that alone may disqualify you. So when you find yourself in such a situation, you want to put in the extra effort of getting to know the recruiter and explaining why you're a better chance. But do not just jump in with the title and assume that it will be a match. 90% of the time, such situations fail. The next one, if you do not have the requisite training, and note here, we are not talking about education. If you don't have the training for the job, do not put it in. Training tells us that you have the skill sets which can be used for the job. So this even applies even if you are 100% qualified, but you don't have the training. You don't need to put it in, especially if it is a highly technical field. It will be tossed aside. You have no transferable skill. None of the skills that you've gathered over the years can be transferred into your new role. One of the most common skills that is transferable is communication. But even with that, there are levels. For example, someone who has done a lot of marketing and PR work can easily transfer into being the policy person or the HR person in charge of policy in a firm, because they have to communicate that policy in a way that it is appealing. But then let's say you've been the accounts payable person and you want to translate into the marketing person. You really need to have a strong justification that you have that extroverted nature to be able to channel the product of it. Because in accounting, as much as you may communicate the firm's account situation, finance situation, and all that, it will take another level of communication for you to be the face of the firm in terms of promoting it and all that. So I want you to notice the nuances here. So always ask yourself, are these skills transferred? If it's not there, please do not put it in. The next one is you are not humble to learn or to be taught. And it's funny, as recruiters, sometimes you meet candidates and you know straight away that there is no way you can make this candidate well because the person is going to be humble. You are trying to explain to the person that, well, this role, you will need this. And the person just brushes you off. Oh, just give me the chance. I can do it. You just, no, it doesn't work. The person inside is telling you what will work. You don't want to take it. There is no way you get in and try. You will fail. So if you are not ready to learn, do not put it in. And the last one, which applies to almost every career you want to go into, not just when you are less than 100% qualified, is if you have no plan for your career progression. People jump to jobs once again because of job title. And that was the very first thing I said when we started this conversation. Jumping to job because of job titles without any clear plan for your career progression is the most fatal thing you can do to yourself if you want to really build a career. So if you have no plan for your career progression, and this job is just to while away the time, just to find something doing, do not apply. If it is just to feed you, then keep that in mind that it's just to feed you, but have an exit plan that I will probably do this till my feet is strong enough to pursue what I want. But if it is just, they are paying 5,000 here, 10,000 there, I just want a job, don't. Recruiters can smell such candidates. And you may laugh at this, but yes, we know it when we see it. And that is why most of the times you will not even get a call, because it will show on your CV, it will show on the first phone call, it will show if you are lucky to get into the interview, it will show on that interview. And at that point, the hiring manager would also sense it and say, bye-bye, I don't want this person. Okay. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. If there are any questions, I believe we can do that now.
Yes, David, thank you so much for this insightful presentation. I think that it has been well received. So before we get into the participants who are on, we'll take the questions from the chat. And so from the chat, Mohasi is saying that for new job seekers straight from the university, for instance, how do you ensure that you at least get a job interview without any job experience? I think that, David, you can take that, and then we'll move on to Samir's question.
Okay, thank you, Irene. So for new job seekers, I always say that you are in a better place than most mid-career people and even senior executives. At any level in anybody's career, the people with the most advantage of landing a job, and this may sound different from what you're experiencing now because of the economy. The people with the most opportunity to land almost any job and redefine their career are those who are fresh from school. Now, how do you get into a job which requires you to get some experience? Let me start with this. You are probably not looking at the right job. If you are an entry-level person, fresh from school, and you are looking at a job that requires you to have 5 years working experience, you shouldn't be applying to that job. Trust me on this one. You will never get into that interview. If it's asking for 2 years, if it's asking for 1 year, and sometimes, I'm using sometimes, if it's asking for 3 years, you have a better chance. Put in your application for such jobs. How do you put in such an application and be guaranteed of an interview? Emphasize on the internships that you had. Emphasize on the volunteer work that you did back in school. Emphasize on the leadership positions that you did back in school. Because it's entry level, the recruiter is not looking for anything unique. We are not looking for anything special. We are looking at your commitment to work and your work ethic. We see this if you've put in the effort to lead a project in school or to lead a group in school. We see this in your internship. Did you do internships beyond the required internship in school? So I know every school would say, probably in your third or second year, you have to do a mandatory internship. But outside of that, did you do attachment, which is unofficial? Did you do some work? Did you do some other internship even after your official internship? When you did your national service, what work did you do? Did you just allow yourself to be asked to go and buy roasted plantain and come back? You really want to tell your story in this phase. And that is what will give you that chance at a job or even a job interview. But if you are aiming for the 5 years, the 6 years, no recruiter will give you that chance. It will not happen. The recruiter that will give you that chance will probably want to mock you. And I have, in every field, we have bad nuts. I have recruiter friends who sometimes just want to tease people. You know, they'll invite you to the interview and more or less embarrass you. And that breaks your spirit. You may not want to even go for another job. You don't want that happening. So when you are fresh from school, 5 years, stay away from those jobs. Aim for the 3, the 2, and the 1 year experience. My best bet, aim for the 1 and 2. You always have a chance. Okay. Any other question?
Yes, and so Samuel is asking, how do we measure the 60% as you had already indicated in your presentation?
Okay, yes, Samuel. So 60% is just calculating so let me just do it in simple terms. In the essential qualifications or the essential qualities, you probably have 10 items listed. 60% would be just 6 of those items. That would be your 60%. If it's 5 items, 60% would be your three items. You just work with that. That is what I'm referring to. So for every amount of listed essential qualities, if it's 10, then that means you are looking at whether you meet 6 of them. Okay, so just calculate. If it's 5, so 5 times 60%, whatever I get, whatever figure I get, round it off to a whole number and check if you meet that. If it's 11, so 11 times 60% or 11 times 60 out of 100, whatever figure I get, round it to the nearest whole number and check if you meet that number of requirements in the essential. That's what I'm referring to. Okay. Okay.
Okay. And so we also want to ask, okay, so this is Dabugat. He said, what of organization that use software system to shortlist due to large volume of application? How can one bring out the keywords that will be advantage? Will some MS Word templates enable the search? It's not really quite good, but I'm sure you get what he wants to say.
I get it because it's a common question that I come across. I think when we were talking, you mentioned my public lecture on the job seekers cheat book. Yes, most large organizations now use these softwares to reduce the number of applications. And yes, we do get a lot of bashing that, okay, so it's unfair, but if you are dealing with 1,200 applicants, it's not the best. So how do you beat this system? You already mentioned the answer, keywords. Always look at the keywords in the job announcement. Now, the job announcement won't say that this is a keyword, but you can know. You can know because when you read the job description, there will be words in there that will jump to you or will be so explanatory of what the role is. Highlight those words. When you read the requirements, both the essential, the desirable, there will be some words in there that will jump out to you. Highlight them. Then when you look at especially the education, when it requires professional qualifications, that one is so clear. Pick on those ones. When you take those words, you want to make sure that in your resume or in your CV, you fit those words in there. I'm not saying just paste them in there, but for every point where you are talking about your experience, when you take it, when a keyword that you borrowed from the job requirements, make sure it finds its way in there. When you are talking about your education, the education that was listed, make sure it finds its way there. When you're able to do this, the chances of the system eliminating you is very low. The second thing is this. Most of the times you eliminate yourself. These systems are just, they just look at responses. Apart from the first one where it works with an algorithm to determine whether you're fit or not, the second bit for most of these systems is the answer you provide for the pre-screening questions actually determines whether you're fit or not. And this is where going back to the job announcement is important. The job announcement listed that the candidate should have 5 years or more working experience. Now, when you were answering the pre-screening question, it asks you how many years of working experience do you have? And you type in 4.5, because in your mind, the recruiter would see 4.5 as 5. And yes, indeed, the recruiter may see it as 4.5 as 5. But then the system is a robot. It does not know 0.5, unless that is how it was programmed. But it was programmed to recognize 5 and above. So that 4.5 will tell the system that discard. And this is a secret that most applicants don't know. Sometimes, and I'm telling you this from a recent one, sometimes it may even be the language requirements. So for example, the rule may say that we need a bilingual, English and French. Now, when it says it needs a bilingual, you speaking French at the elementary level, or in other words, you having studied French at GSS, doesn't make you a bilingual. So the question may come that, what is your level of fluency in French? And you may choose elementary, thinking that once you've chosen elementary, instead of, the options will be there, none, elementary, fluent, mother tongue. These are the 4 levels. In your mind, okay, if I choose none, it means I'm not bilingual. So let me choose elementary. In case they want to test me, I chose elementary, so they wouldn't expect much from me. The system has been programmed to accept fluent and native or mother tongue as ideal. So once you choose elementary, it eliminates you. So most of the times, the answers you even give to this system is what will kick you out. So if you are, especially if you are in that 4.5 range towards the 5 years, do the 5 years. So that gets through to the recruiter. The recruiter sees it, realizes, oh, it's actually a 4.5, but he checks out on everything. Let's give him a chance. The system is to reduce the numbers, because if we have to screen 1,200 applications, trust me, you hear from them in the next 7 years if you want the ideal candidate.
Yes, thank you for that. I think that this is a comment, but I think I would rather reframe it as a question. So how do you do when you go to an interview and then the recruiters will not show any impression? It's like a straight face. How do you know you are doing well? How do you encourage yourself during such times? Yeah.
Okay, so that would be the typical me on this call. I think I'm showing all my expressions, smiling and all, but in a typical interview, I do well to keep my face very straight. And I'm sure a lot of recruiters do that, because we don't want to give the wrong impressions. At any point in time, the recruiter is talking to 2 other people. We don't want to give you the impression that we are smiling because we agree with you, which may be true, but then we meet the next candidate and the next candidate is superb. So in your mind, I blew that interview, you walk out, you get the message, you did not make it because someone else also did better. So what do you do in such a situation? My answer is, do not pay attention to the facial expression, whether it is welcoming or non-receptive. Because in both cases, you'll be doing yourself a disservice. Why am I saying this? Take it from the viewpoint that the recruiter is even giving you a stoned face, not smiling, being very straight. Would you say that you are not doing well? And would that cause you to lose focus? If you are that kind of person, then you would find it very difficult in being comfortable in an interview, and that may affect your opportunity. So the reason why we keep the straight faces, you won't be able to read. When you're not able to read, you would put in your best. But if you are able to read, we are smiling. You might feel, oh, I'm already there, so you may relax. If we put up a very non-receptive face where we are probably shaking our heads, it may even confuse you and say, I'm not doing well. So the best one is keep a blank face. Like what I'm doing now, a blank face. You don't know whether I'm happy or not. And we do that so that you know that you are neither winning nor losing. Just do what you need to do. Give us your best self. So for me, I always say, ignore the facial expression and talk to them as if this is your chance to let them know how great a person you are. Ignore the face, okay?
Right. Thank you so much. We have this very long question. I think that we take that and then we'll go to Mohammed on the chat, on the call. If you have any question, kindly put in the chat. You can also raise your hands. We would allow you to speak. So Mualim is saying, what exactly do you mean by a qualification? Academic papers. A lot of graduates have theoretical knowledge, but lacking skills and the necessary know-how. Some young people have developed digital skills without university degree. How can we Africanize or contextualize our approach of defining job qualifications? I think this is huge, but we can make it. David, over to you.
Yeah, and I really appreciate this question because it's something that even is a conversation that goes on within the circles of recruiters. Now, when we talk about qualification, it varies depending on the kind of role. So, for example, if you are looking for an academic to lead a project, then of course the qualification would have to do with the number of academic papers the person has done, the research the person has done within that space. So in my current organization, we have a role that deals with climate change, And there is no way you find someone working in a typical corporate environment having the knowledge that is needed to lead that climate change unit. You need an academic, someone who has done the research. So their papers would be the qualifications we are talking about. But then we come to the typical corporate environment. Qualifications here would now talk about, first of all, the degree that the person has done, whether the first degree or the second degree. Then, of course, it would come to the professional qualification. Every profession has a qualification or a qualifying paper. So in human resource, we have the PHR, we have the SPHR. In accounting, we have ICAG, we have ACCA, and so on. In procurement, there's SIPs. In marketing, there's CIM. So those are also qualifications. So when I say qualification here, I'm referring to these two parties. But the kind of job will determine which one the recruiter will be looking for. And in this case, yes, academic qualifications would be the case if the role is such that it requires someone with a research background to lead on a project or to implement a project that is heavily dependent on what? Research. Now, the second part of the question is the one I'm very happy about. People who have done great things without having these qualifications. This is where experience trumps having these papers. And you remember from my presentation, I mentioned that having the training or even the qualification with additional work experience is good. Most of the times, when we realize that the person has the skill, has the ability to execute, but does not have the qualification, every good firm will provide a waiver for such candidates. The catch thing here is that you should prove that you are able to be. And that is where you must present your portfolio of projects. So I'm looking for a computer science person who has developed a very good software. Trust me, the last thing I'll look at is whether he has a degree or not. The first thing is, can you do this software? This is what we want to do. Show me an example. You show me an example, it works. Your qualification, I will just need to make a case for it to be waived. It is difficult in some firms, okay? In some firms that I have worked with as a consultant and also in-house, sometimes such situations are difficult to defend. So I always tell such people that, look, you have it, but we really need you to get this qualification. What we can do now is probably give you some kind of arrangement where you do this project for us, but then if you really want to work with us full time, because the firm needs this, you need it. On the other side of HR practice, there are conversations with leadership to let them understand that candidates can never be perfect. So in some situations, we need those special waivers where the ability to do the job beyond just having the qualification is needed. So you have to make that excuse. And I must say, some firms are getting to that point. In the West, companies like Facebook, Google, they've gone past that. Can you do it? Yes. Your qualification doesn't even conclude. Once you can execute, we can work with you. In Africa, we are not there yet because we are still stuck on the papers and the titles. But I can say that in the next 15 years, we may get there. We may get there because we are having a lot of young people with digital skills challenging the status quo and even opening their doors. Some of them have started firms and they are saying that if you can do it, come in, your qualifications maybe later on. Okay, so we are getting there. We are not there yet. But I always say that for such people, prove your skill set. But so far as we are in this economy, do your best to also get that additional qualification to better your chances. Yeah.
Right. David, I think that we'll take from Ajiman Ocheta, who is asking experience versus enthusiasm. Which one of these increases a job seeker's chance of impressing the interview panel or making it through? Should a job seeker adopt one or deploy both of them tactfully?
Okay. I would say if you have both, good for you. It would be every hiring manager's dream to have that job seeker who has both experience and enthusiasm. They are very rare. In my entire career, I can just point at a few people that are found in that space. Now, which one matters the most? It depends on the level you are going for. Entry level enthusiasm will do you a very good service. Enthusiasm would really push you far. Mid-level enthusiasm would do some work, but then experience would always trump enthusiasm. At the senior level, you probably need to be very smart in deciding when you are moving, because at the senior level, it's assumed that you already have the experience. It's the enthusiasm that we need to see. And let me just focus at the senior level. For most senior executives, the jobs come chasing them. If you speak to chief finance officers, if you speak to CEOs, they are being chased by other firms to come and lead their firms. So it would require them having, I don't want to use the word enthusiasm, but it will require them having a passion to succeed for them to be able to thrive at that new firm. So it varies per the level. For senior executives, the passion must be really high because the skill or the experience is already there. And even at that level, it is not a matter of them executing on their own, but executing through people. So if they have that experience, they can execute it through people, but they need that passion to be able to drive others to get there. Mid-level, it's not so clear because it changes depending on the kind of job. But I always say having a balance is great so that it can easily move in, or it can easily be detected when you're applying for a role that, okay, you have what we need in terms of experience or in terms of passion. So it's not so clear. But for the lower level, entry level, your best bet is to show the passion because you don't have any real experience to prove apart from probably your intention. But then your passion, which should be translated to your work ethic, let me add this, is what will give you a better chance. And I'm saying this for the young ones because the reason why most of us, this may sound very cold, but please trust me because I know you can get a job if you follow this. The reason most of you may not be getting jobs is because of your work ethic and your attitude. Young people will reach out to you on LinkedIn and go something like this. Hey, David, what's up? I've seen your job. Can I apply? It doesn't work that way. Attitude, work ethic. You did your national service. Work starts at 8. You were getting in at 9:30 because you know the manager of the team. It doesn't work that way. So passion should be seen in how you present yourself in terms of attitude and how you do your work. If you are passionate about the work, 8, you'll be there at 7:45. Trust me, you will not have any excuse. If you're even late, you will call and say, I'm running late. You don't walk in and expect everybody to be okay because you got in late, there was traffic in town. Okay, so this is what I have to say when it comes to enthusiasm and experience.
Okay, I think we'll take the last one, but those of us requesting for the video, since you registered, you are on our mailing list, we'll send you the videos so that you can go through at your free time. And when you want some pointers or tips for your next job application, you can go back and refer to the video. And so I think that this is still a question that relates to what you just answered, but it says, do employers prefer skill or character? Which should we focus on? Which should we focus or show when doing an interview?
Okay, so these two things matter at different stages of the recruitment process, and I want us to take note of them as we apply. So your skill matters when you're applying. So you should show very clearly on your CV, your skill matters. But at the interview, it's your character that matters. And I was saying that recruiters can smell attitude right from the get-go. It's not that recruiters are special, but anybody who has worked in a field, and by this I'm referring even to the hiring manager, they know certain red flags when they see it at that interview. So at the interview, it is your character that begins to matter. Your skill as expressed in your CV got you into the interview room. And as much as the questions may even be relating to your experience and your skill, your character will be shown in how you respond. For example, if I have a question such as you are in a situation where you are not getting feedback from a colleague who has information that you need to do your work, how would you approach that colleague to get that feedback? There are many ways to answer this, but your answer would actually tell us the kind of character that you have. The first person may say that I may reach out to that colleague and remind him that I need that information, let him understand why it's important, and ask him if he's having a challenge. That is someone who is a team player, but is also task-oriented. The second person may say that, why are you delaying? You know how important this is. If you don't give it to me, I'll report you. Now, this is someone who's also task-oriented, but that person is not a team player. Then there's someone who say that, I'll just report to the next person in authority. I cannot waste my time. Some of these things, he needs to be escalated. This is also someone who is ready to go to the extreme point. Now, in all of this, we don't have any bad answer, do we? Because they're all trying to get their work done, which is what we want. But then when you are looking at building a team that works well, you won't want to go with person 3 who says that I'll report to the highest authority, because that is too extreme. You will create bad blood quickly in the office. And if you work long enough, you know that sometimes what makes you succeed is not because everybody has skill, it's because everybody works well together. So you don't want such a person in your team. I'm giving you tricks of how people are eliminated. The second person you will drop because you realize that the person would be very controlling. If you have such a person in your team, you would always worry about how you treat others if you are not there. Unless the kind of work you do allows for bullying or intimidation, you can go for the second person, but you go for that person in a very careful way. You always be watching your back because you don't know what you do to break the team. But the third person is the ideal. I'm not saying that that person answers there and then we'll do that, but then it tells you that at least the person reasons, looks at it's socially aware. That's the word I'm looking for. It's socially aware, emotionally intelligent. And you want such people in your team. People who are ready to let people know the truth, but then would also add that element of decency to it. And so these are the things that you look at. At the interview, it is character. But then at the job application stage, it's your skill. So you want that to be your focus as you apply.
Great. Thank you so much, David, for this insightful session. I think that we've all learned one or two from this session. And then we also want to thank everyone for joining this session. We don't have any more questions in the chat. Okay, I think that there is, but he said, how can STEM applicants prevent themselves as very good employees in the financial sector of the job market, as the STEM candidates are mostly analytical in their approach? I think we'll take this last one and then we'll bring the session to a close. David.
Okay, sure. This would require a lot of conversation because STEM, for most STEM applicants, the whole idea of STEM is actually bringing people with their skills within the science field, within the engineering, mathematical field, to actually bring about those innovative things that we are looking at. Now, yes, STEM is very important, especially in finance, where we are now looking at developing technologies that would make our financial processes much more efficient, much more secure and all that. What the STEM person can do, first of all, before you go for that application, is to actually begin to familiarize yourself with what the financial sector does and to identify what you can do as a STEM candidate to actually make things better in there. Now, once you do this, I would always encourage you to develop a prototype. That is, if you are within the digital space or computer science, for example. If you are within engineering, actually making physical products, also look at what the concepts that you can come up with. If you are within mathematics, think of what you can do from that space. You know, these multiple factors, you want to come up with a product or service that you can market to the financial sector. But for you to be able to do this, you want to find out the problems they have, because the product you bring about shouldn't just be another product. It should be a product that actually solves a problem, or it could be a platform that makes an issue better, or makes something better than it was before. If you can do this, you would position yourself for the financial sector. And if you are looking at the financial sector, what I would say is one of the biggest headaches of the financial sector is security. You know, people are losing their money through fraudulent BTC transaction, Bitcoin transaction, or cryptocurrency. People are losing their money through phishing scams and fake notices and all that. So security is still a big thing within the financial sector. So if you can start exploring that field, you may position yourself as a very good candidate. Pitch yourself to some of the big banks or even the insurance agencies, especially. There are multiple opportunities in that space. So that is why I want you to start looking at first. Look at the problems there, develop a solution, and then pitch yourself. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for this session. I don't know, I'm excited. They don't want us to close. We don't want to close, but we have to. So we have to move on to the next things that we are supposed to do. And so this is brought to you courtesy by the Africa Jobs Board, which is housed in the Association of Africa Universities, with our partners Warwick and then also ESA Africa, who are part of this conversation to help mobility of work to mobility of people in Africa. And so if you would want to join, if you want to be part of the team, you can go to africa.edujobs.com. You can see all the jobs that have been displayed. If also you are a member of the AAU, you're also encouraged to send your jobs to us through the Jobs Board team. You can also join our Facebook page, our Twitter or Instagram page at AF Jobs Board, so that you can see what is going on. If you look at the statistics that the Deputy Project Manager had put about, we've posted over 4,000 jobs. And so I'm sure if you are here, you are starting and you need a job, especially in the academia, you can go to the Jobs Board site. And with the education you have received today, you can make a good choice and then put on a good CV, and also be confident in the interviews that you would go. And if you keep joining, these are some of the informative sections that we bring to you. We bring you experts in the field. So we kindly request that you would register, be part of the Jobs Board team. If your association is also not part of the AAU, we are encouraging you to start the process to register, because these are some of the benefits that you get when you join the AAU. And so on behalf of the Secretary General of the AAU, Professor Olushola Oyewole, we want to send our heartwarm thank you for joining us, especially to David for taking us through this 2-hour session. We didn't even think it could go that much, but it has been insightful. It has been amazing. And everyone who joined us, thank you so much. We would send you the videos so that you don't miss out on anything if you want to go back on any of the questions. And so thank you so much for joining. And then we would see you same time when we send you another link. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.